a simple family portrait shows a mother sitting between her two daughters. At first glance, it looks like any ordinary old photograph, but if you pay closer attention to their hands, the whole picture suddenly changes. Dr. James Mitchell had spent 15 years of his career carefully studying old photographs at the New York Historical Society. He had looked at thousands of images from America's past daguerreotypes, tintypes, and albumen prints. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. The package came from an estate sale in Brooklyn. Inside, carefully wrapped in old newspaper from 1923, were dozens of glass plate negatives. Most of them showed exactly what you would expect from the late 1800s. Serious businessmen with large mustaches, wedding groups frozen in time, and children sitting stiffly in their best Sunday clothes. But one single image stopped Dr. Mitchell completely. 3 black women stared back at him across more than 100. Nash. In the center sat the mother, about 40 years old, in a beautifully carved wooden chair. Her 2 daughters, young women probably in their late teens or early 20s, stood on either side with steady, protective poses. All 3 wore their finest outfits, high-collar gowns decorated with delicate lace that showed careful, skilled work. Their hair was neatly arranged with great care. Behind them was a painted garden scene, the kind often used in portrait studios back then. What truly caught James's attention was not their elegant clothes or calm expressions. It was something much smaller and quieter, their hands. The mother's hands rested in her lap, but her finger positions were very unusual. Her right thumb crossed deliberately over her left hand. Her index and middle fingers stretched straight out while the other fingers curled inward in a clear, exact shape. This was no natural resting position. It looked planned and full of meaning. The daughters had placed their hands on their mother's shoulders, a common loving gesture for family portraits of that time, but their fingers were also arranged in specific patterns bent at careful angles with thumbs placed in particular ways that echoed their mother's signals. James had studied Victorian-era photography for years. He knew that long exposure times forced people to stay perfectly still for 30 seconds or more. Every part of the photo was carefully directed by the photographer: the tilt of the head, the position of the body, even the placement of the hands. These hand shapes were far too precise and deliberate to be random or comfortable. He picked up his magnifying glass and looked even closer. In the bottom right corner of the glass negative, almost too small to notice, someone had scratched tiny letters into the glass. NY89247. A cold feeling ran down his spine. This was not just a simple family portrait. It was something much more. That night, sleep would not come. James turned his dining into a research station covered with books, old documents in his laptop. He had made a clear, high-resolution digital copy of the negative earlier that day. Now the portrait filled his computer screen in sharp detail. He could see every thread in their dresses, the fine engraving on the mother's small brooch, and even the slight differences in the sisters' faces. But his focus stayed locked on the hands. He zoomed in until the fingers filled the entire screen. The positions were clearly intentional. Holding those exact shapes through a long exposure took real effort and planning. James knew from history that people who faced oppression had often created clever secret ways to communicate. They used special quilt patterns, certain songs, and everyday objects to pass messages safely. He wondered if these hand positions were part of a similar hidden system used after slavery ended. The next morning, he invited Dr. Sarah Chen, a leading scholar of African American history, to see the photograph. She arrived carrying a heavy bag full of research papers. James projected the portrait large on the wall. The 3 women looked down at them with quiet strength. "Look at their hands," James said, tracing the shapes with a red laser pointer. "Every finger is placed with clear purpose." Sarah studied the image carefully and then began to explain. After Reconstruction collapsed in 1877, black families in northern cities like New York faced different kinds of struggles. They had trouble proving they owned their homes, showing their marriages were real, or even proving who they were. Many had been born into slavery with no birth papers. Many marriages had taken place without official licenses. When white claimants or officials challenged them, they often lost everything because they had no documents. Sarah spread out old court papers, newspaper clippings, and property records from the 1880s and 1890s. She showed how black families created their own support networks to help one another. These groups shared lawyers, information, and ways to prove their rights when the official system ignored them. James asked quietly, "What if this photograph is actually a form of documentation? What if the hand positions are a code that only people in the network could read?" The scratched code NY89247 became the first clue. After 2 days of searching old city records, James discovered it pointed to Studio 247, owned by a photographer named Thomas Wright. Wright was a white man from Massachusetts who had opened his studio on 8th Avenue in the late 1880s. Unlike most white photographers, he welcomed black customers and charged them the same fair prices. He even advertised in black newspapers. Working together with Dr. Marcus Thompson, an expert in old coding systems, they carefully traced the hand positions. The gestures were not random. They seemed to form a simple but smart system that could show a person's role, their needs, or their status inside the network. Sarah made another important discovery while studying old court cases. Many black families won difficult property and identity cases with help from a lawyer named Robert Hayes. He often brought family portraits to court as proof that the families were respectable and belonged to the community. Old letters showed that Wright, Hayes, church leaders, and other trusted people had quietly built a parallel system. They photographed families using special hand codes. These pictures served two purposes. They gave families a dignified portrait and helped the network verify identities and support legal claims when official papers were missing or denied. The first portrait James found belonged to Eleanor Morrison and her daughters, Ruth and Grace. Eleanor had been born into slavery in Virginia. After the Civil War, she traveled north with her baby daughter Ruth and settled in Brooklyn. Her second daughter, Grace, was born free in New York. Eleanor worked as a talented seamstress, creating beautiful embroidery to support her family. She was also deeply involved in her church and quietly helped many other families with paperwork, housing, and finding honest lawyers. The network operated roughly from 1888 to 1897. It helped hundreds of black families protect their homes, legal marriages, and children's futures by creating their own careful records hidden inside ordinary-looking photographs. 3 months after the discovery, James and Sarah opened a special exhibition at the Historical Society. They displayed 20 of Thomas Wright's portraits showing the hand code system, along with the real stories of the families. Patricia Johnson, Eleanor's great-great-granddaughter, came with her daughter and granddaughter. Other descendants also arrived, sharing old family stories and letters that finally made sense. One man stood before a portrait of his great-grandfather, the lawyer Robert Hayes, and said softly, "I always knew he helped people, but I never realized how organized and brave it was." A woman looking at another portrait said, "My family told me he was once arrested for helping with fraudulent documents. Now I understand those documents were not fake. They were helping people get the rights they truly deserved." The New York Times wrote a long article about the exhibition titled "Hidden in Plain Sight." Soon, historians from other cities contacted James. They had found similar secret documentation networks in Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, and Baltimore, all using subtle codes and photographs during the same difficult years. 6 months later, James stood in the conservation lab, gently holding the original glass negative that had started everything. The photographs had been carefully restored and digitized so descendants and researchers could see them. The portrait of Eleanor and her daughters had become famous, printed in books, shown in documentaries, and displayed in museums. But for James, the real power was personal. He thought about Eleanor Morrison, who had survived slavery, built a life in Brooklyn, and quietly worked to help others when the world tried to erase them. She and her daughters had posed with their hands in special positions so their story could survive and one day be understood. In her old diary, Eleanor had written, "Had our portrait made today. Mr. Wright understands what we are building." The girls were a little nervous, but I told them this picture will matter. Someday people will see what we did here. She was right. The simple family portrait had waited more than 130 years to tell its true story. Through small, careful gestures, these women and many others left behind proof of their courage, intelligence, and determination to create justice when it was denied to them. Sometimes the smallest details carry the deepest truths. You just need to look closely enough to see what has been waiting there all along.